Hi, my name is Sean Walker, and I am part of the product success team here at ServiceNow. Today I'm going to be taking you through a demo of the bulk import feature that was added in the Vancouver release of Enterprise Asset Management. The bulk import feature simplifies enterprise model and asset creation when migrating from an existing data source or with updates to the enterprise assets and models throughout their lifecycle. It supports the bulk creation or update directly from spreadsheet. A key benefit that the bulk import now provides the customer is that it allows enterprise admins to perform bulk updates rather than having sysadmins do the work. It allows for the import of multiple different types of models and assets within the same import template and provides a detailed error results if any errors are encountered during the import process. The most common use case we'll see for the new bulk update feature is when new EAM customers need to migrate their enterprise asset data from a different system or database into the ServiceNow instance. They need to do this before they can really start using the functionality that EAM provides. EAM admins can update and create enterprise models and assets using a spreadsheet and upload both at the same time. The bulk import utility supports models and assets from multiple types, including consumable, simple, pre-assembled, and user-assembled. EAM admins can also now see the results and errors of uploading records, allowing them to remediate any issues. The customer persona affected by this update is the enterprise admins. They now have the ability to bulk up import models and assets, whereas before this could only be performed by a system admin. The role you require to do this would be an enterprise admin. What you're seeing on the screen is the bulk import flow diagram. It outlines the steps and processes that you must take in order to successfully complete a bulk update. The first step is to download the template. There are different templates available, one for the model, one for the asset, and one for both model and asset. Once you've downloaded the template, you're going to want to fill in the spreadsheet with all of the relevant details that you're wanting to import. You'll likely have received some sort of notice from your vendor or manufacturer that you can use to populate the template, or you could be transferring data from a legacy system of different kinds of assets that you want to import into the environment. The next step is to make sure you have created all the required data in the instance. For example, you might want to reference manufacturers, vendors, and locations when you're creating or updating the models and assets. In order to do so, you need to ensure that data is already existing in the instance to avoid any potential errors. Once a template has been populated, you'll begin the process of uploading the spreadsheet. Once the upload completes, it will trigger the bulk import flow. And depending on what you are importing or updating, it will run specific transforms and scripts to complete the process. So for example, if you're going to create models or update models, it will run the model transform map, and then it will run the model component transform map. Whereas if you're creating assets, it's only going to run the asset transform map. If you're creating both models and assets, it will first run the model transform, then the model component transform, and finally the asset transform map. The next step would be to fix any errors. So after the bulk import has finished, it will provide you details and comments on any errors that have been occurred during the import process. You'll want to ensure you remediate those errors in your template prior to running the import in the production instance. It's also important to go in and review the asset and model data that was created as part of this process. You're going to want to make sure that all of the fields you populated in the template have been properly carried over into the records that were created. For example, like I mentioned previously, you'll want to make sure that fields like manufacturer, location, etc. Have been updated successfully. Once that's complete, you can go ahead and run the bulk import in your production instance without any errors. Now I'm going to walk you through a demo of populating the asset and model transform and then performing the bulk update. Okay, so I've logged into a Vancouver instance with Enterprise Asset Management installed. So the first thing I need to do to download or to import assets and models in bulk is go to the Asset Operations dashboard. In the Asset Operation dashboard, you will be able to start by either creating models and assets together, updating assets, updating models and assets, or creating models and creating assets. The first step for this is making sure you have the right template. So if you go into, say, Create Asset, and you click on the New button, first thing you'll see is the download template. You're going to need this template to be able to populate and then therefore create assets in bulk. Each different section, so create assets, create models, and create assets and models, has their own template. So I'm just going to do demo today populating the creating models and assets at the same time. And I'm going to walk you through populating the template and all the different mandatory fields. So what I'm going to do is get a copy of the template and download that. So now that I've got a copy downloaded, I'm going to switch over to Excel and start to populate that template. So I'm just going to navigate to my downloaded template. Sorry, I'm doing it on my other screen. And I'm going to open up Excel, which opens up the template file. So the first thing you'll notice when you look at the template is the very first column is your index. Your index is really important to sequence how things are going in. Obviously, when you start getting into creating user assembled models and pre-assembled models that have components and multiple components for them, you're going to need to make sure that the parent model is created before the child's are created. Same thing goes with assets. You're going to need to make sure the parent is created before the child, so that's why you want to have your index and sequence things. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at some of the default fields as we go through. So I'm going to start off by creating a simple model. So I'm going to start with my index to number 1. And for a simple model, the manufacturer, model name, model number, model category, and model type are going to be mandatory fields that we need to fill in. So I make that a little bit more visible for you so that we need to fill in to make sure that we create the model. So the first field that we have to fill in is the manufacturer. Now, one of the things you're going to want to make sure you do is make sure that the manufacturer is within the instance. If it's a new manufacturer, somebody you haven't used before, you're going to want to come over and check and go back into the instance and check to make sure that that manufacturer exists. So I'm going to quickly jump over and look in the system and the filter navigator for manufacturers. And for this demo, I'm going to be using Acme Americas as my manufacturer. So I'm just going to search here for Acme, and I can see that there is no manufacturer for Acme. So what I want to do is make sure that that's manufacturers in the system. I'm just going to go back a level and take a look at the companies, because the manufacturer setting is actually an attribute on the company record. So I can see here that Acme Americas has a company record, but if I add the field for manufacturer to my list view, I can see that that's currently set to false. So if I update this and update this to true, now Acme Americas is a manufacturer. So now I can come back in here, go to manufacturers, and I can see already here, there's Acme Americas right there. So now if I hop back to my template, I can now use Acme Americas as my manufacturer. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to start filling out the model name, the model number, and the model category. So for this, we're just going to do a simple medical device. So again, I'm just making these up. You're going to likely have an invoice or a purchase order with all of this relevant type information that you're going to be pulling this on, or even an advanced ship notice from your vendor. So we're just going to call this model number. We're just going to give it a model number of simple medical device. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to say it's a medical device model category. So again, all of these type fields, manufacturer, model category, model type, etc., are reference fields. So you're going to want to make sure that the model category you're defining is exactly like it is in the instance. Sorry, model type is not a reference field, but it is definitely a source field. So I want to specify that this is a simple model type. And one thing to note is that the model type is very case sensitive. The scripts that run when you run the bulk import will look for the model type in a very specific syntax. So all of the model types are going to be lowercase, and we'll walk through that here in a minute. So I've got my model, and I've got my model category, my model name, my simple model, and you also have all of the other fields on the model record that you could potentially want to populate. So for example, cost, depreciation, etc. For now, I'm going to keep it pretty simple, not really populate any of these other fields. Again, remember fields like owner, right? That's going to be a reference field to a user. Short description I can put in there. This is a test, status, useful life. You know, if you're going to be using asset refresh, etc., you're going to want to specify useful life. So you could put in 72 months, etc., for the rest of your model fields. Now, so all of these entries are going to create your model record for you when the import runs and the multiple scripts run behind the scenes to create this. So if we keep going all the way over here to the right, these are all still different model fields for all the different model types. We finally get into the fields for the asset. One of the key things to note for the asset for the asset transform or the create model and asset is that asset tag is a mandatory field. So it's important that you know the asset tags or that the customer is using, or you have to predefine some fields that you're going to want to use for asset tag if they don't actually tag the assets themselves. So we're just going to create some generic tags here since I don't actually have any real assets. We're going to call this Acme tag 123. We're going to make sure serial number is in here. This is a simple asset, so it's not going to have a parent asset. A simple asset's always going to have a quantity of 1. We're going to give it a state of in stock. Again, watching your syntax on your states. Your substate, let's make this one available. And we're going to pick the stock room. So again, this is again a reference field, so I'm just going to quickly hop back over into the instance. And I'm going to take a look at the inventory dashboard, and let's put them into the EAM stockroom east, because this is where we're receiving these particular assets into. So I'm going to put EAM stockroom east. Whoa. And then the location is also mandatory. So we're going to come over here, back in, make sure we know the location of EAM East is New York City. So we'll go back into Excel. We'll put in the New York City. And again, now you have all of the remaining asset fields that you can populate, like example cost, etc., department, and all the different asset related fields that you would want to populate or that are mandatory for the customer's organization. One of the other key fields you probably want to put in is warranty date, right? Warranty date is one of those things you always want to make sure that you're putting in when you create your assets, because you usually are creating your assets based off of some sort of purchase order, some sort of invoice or advanced ship notice that generally contains this information. So this is how you would create a model, a simple model, and a corresponding asset to go with that model. The next type of model that we're going to create is a consumable. So again, we're going to use Acme as our manufacturer. We're going to call this a consumable medical device. Again, we're going to make up a model number. Medical device, oops, MD, put in some random numbers here. Again, this is a medical device model category, and the model type is consumable. Now we're going to go all the way over again. Now you can hide some of these fields, or you can remove some of these fields from your template. But for the interest of this demonstration, I'm just going to leave them all here so you can continue to see how many fields are actually available for you to populate via the bulk update. Now, consumables don't generally get asset tagged, and they don't have serial numbers. They're not tracked on a serial number basis. They are tracked on a quantity basis. So we can say we're going to put in 5 consumables of this. We're going to say they're in stock, available, in the same stock room and the same location. So we can copy all these fields. And then we can come over here and we can put in a cost as well. So now we just created the consumable model and 5 consumable assets to go with that. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to come through here and we are going to do a user assemble. This is where it gets a bit more complicated on populating the template. So again, I'm going to use Acme Americas as my company. I'm just going to copy and paste from another sheet here that I have. So this is a model name, is your user assembled medical device. We're going to give it a model number. And we're going to give this a model category of medical device. And the, again, model type for this one would be a user underscore assembled. Okay, so since this is the parent model, we don't need to fill in the remaining components. But once we get into the component sections, we're going to have to fill these in. So these ones, when we start getting into the components for user defined and user assembled and pre-assembled, we'll need to make sure we fill in these fields as well. So I'll just highlight these so we can see them as well. So now I'm going to come over again to my asset field. Sorry for the crazy scrolling as I go through here. And again, this is going to be a serialized asset, so it's going to need an asset tag. Let's just give it an 888. Let's give it a serial 888. It's not going to have a parent asset because it is the parent asset. The quantity by default is going to be 1. And then we are going to copy the same fields because it's going to go into the same location. We'll put a little bit higher cost because it is a bigger model. So now we have a user assembled model and a user assembled asset.
Now we're going to create the components for that user assembled. So we're going to call this, again, we're going to have Acme here as the manufacturer. We're going to have the user assembled component, and then we're just going to give it a model number here. And then we are going to give it the model category. Again, it's a medical device. And this is going to be a simple asset. So your user assembled is comprised of multiple different assets. In this case, we're going to have a simple. So since this is a component of the user assembled parent, we're going to need to copy over the information for the parent model number. So parent manufacturer, parent model number, model name, and then model number. Also, we're introducing with Vancouver component numbers. That's going to be covered in another video or documentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter a component number for this, making up a random component number. Quantity, this will be how many of this particular type of asset are included in the user assembled asset. In this case, I'm just going to go with a quantity of 1. And this is where we're going to want to populate the Boolean fields, which whether they are required, hot swappable, and repairable. So when if you remember in the other examples, when you've created them manually, these are checkboxes that you can enable as you create your components. So we're just going to say these are all true. And again, we're going to go across and create an asset now that'll correspond to that particular model. So I'm going to make up some numbers here. And now here is where we want to specify the parent. So we're going to want to specify the parent asset tag for this component. And again, we're going to want to make sure it goes into these same locations. And again, we can put another cost in here. Okay, so now we have the parent, we have one child asset, or sorry, one component and one child asset. Let's add another component to this model. Let me just find my stuff here. And we're going to say, we're going to make a consumable now. So we're going to call this user assembled computer man. Then we're going to basically copy. We're going to have its own model number. We're going to give it a model category. And again, it's going to be a consumable. Now again, since this is a component, we are going to want to specify what it is a component of. We are going to give it a component number. And this is something you're going to want to probably track, and your customers will have different component numbers for each one of their components. We're going to say we need 5 of these. And are they required? Yes. Are they hot swappable? Yes. Are they repairable? Not really. They're consumables. And again, we're going to go all the way over. Now we're going to want to create our consumable assets that go along with this. So consumables don't have asset tags or serial numbers, but they do have a parent asset, and they will be going into a stock room with it. And they will have a cost with it. Okay, so now again, we've got our main user assembled asset with 2 components to it, and the corresponding parent asset and child assets. Now let's go through and create a predefined, or sorry, preassembled model. So we're going to go to Acme Americas. We are going to call this a preassembled medical device. We are going to give it a model number. And again, it is going to be a medical device. And this one is going to be a pre_assembled. And again, this is the pre-assembled model, so it doesn't have a parent. Again, we're going to come all the way over to the assets. Wherever they are, we're going to make sure it has an asset tag. And a serial. And again, it is the parent, so we don't need to have a parent asset. And we're again going to make it in the same location because we're receiving all of this stuff in the same location. Okay, so now I'm going to create some component models. So we are going to have a pre-assembled component. Sorry, this is Acme. The pre-assembled component number. And model categories, medical devices, and let's call this a simple asset as well. Now again, since this is a component of a pre-assembled model, we're going to want to copy the parent information. Going to want to give it a component number and how many of them. Again, whether they're required, are they hot swappable, and are they repairable? Now the thing here is we're going to say that there's a component required for 2. So there's 2 of these components required, whereas we did the user assemble, we just did 1. So we are going to have to create 2 separate asset records. Since simple assets are serialized, you're going to need to have 2 rows for 1 for each asset. So in order to do that, when you insert an asset or create an asset, you need to also specify what the model is. So it's going to be the same manufacturer model and model number, except for when the script runs, it's actually not going to create this model. So we don't need to specify what the model category is. So again, this is where the index comes in, where you've got, it's going to be creating this simple model first, and now we're just going to be adding a second asset. So again, we don't need to have the model category and model type. We do need to have, no, we don't need to have, sorry, the parent information either, because the parent information was already created when we created this this model. So we're going to scroll all the way over into our assets, and we're going to create the 2 asset records now that go with that. So we're going to put in a tag for the first one and a serial number. And again, we need to make sure we're relating this to the parent asset. And we are going to make sure it's in stock, available in the stock room with the location, and give it a cost of, I don't know, $1,000, let's say. And now we're going to create the second asset. And again, it's the same parent asset and pretty much the same information across the board here. Okay, so now we have the pre-assembled model being created and the pre-assembled asset being created, parent asset being created. We have a component being created, component model being created, and we're relating that to the parent pre-assembled model. And then we also have two assets that are being created to go along with that. And so once you've got all your fields populated, you check your syntax again. Some of the things to remember is if you're copying and pasting from, say, a purchase order or an invoice or some sort of other document, you do have to be careful for things like leading spaces, trailing spaces, any kind of weird formatting that may come over when you're copying and pasting from other sheets. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. Okay, so this should be automatically saved. I'll save it anyway. I'm going to close this down. And now I'm going to jump back into the instance. Close down a few extra tabs here. And again, now I'm going to go back to the asset operations, same place I downloaded the template from, and I'm going to start the import process. So we're going to give this particular import a name. So we're going to go demo, create models and assets. I'm going to attach the file that I just created. And I'm going to click on the import button. And what will happen is it'll start showing you the details of what's going on and the status of what's going on. So first it's going to run through, it's going to create the models. Then it's going to create the model components, and then it's going to create the assets. So as you can see, it's gone through here, and now we have the results, and we have a summary. This is the details page will give you a summary of what happened in each one of the different stages it went through. So there were 8 rows, and I'm just going to actually go back and I'm going to open up quickly that template we populated just to verify. So yes, we had 8 rows. So that's right. It ignored 1. So we'll take a look at why it ignored 1. And it did 7 model inserts. On the asset import, it has 8 rows. It inserted 7 assets and ignored 1. So something maybe happened on the asset side. So let's go into the model import staging, and this will actually tell us what happened for each row, and gives us a summary and some potential error messages that happen on each row. So I'm just going to sort this by the index number so we can kind of cross-reference it to our spreadsheet. So row 1 through 7 were inserted properly. Row 8 was ignored. So the transform maps that were created have logic built into them. And obviously, since there are things like a user-defined and a pre-assembled models, it knows that there could be multiples, right? There could be multiple components that go with that. So it says this row has been skipped as another row with the same data has been processed. So if we go back into the spreadsheet and we take a look at row 8, right? If we remember, row 8 was the second asset we created for the pre-assembled model. So it created the model in row 7, but then this is just creating an asset. So that makes sense that on the model transform, it ignored this because it already did the create here. Okay, so everything looks good there. If we go to the model component imports, again, we're sorted by index, and you can see that it definitely ignored some of the rows, but that does make sense. If you remember, row 1 was a simple model, so therefore it is not a component. Row 2 was a consumable model, so again, it was not a component. Row 3 was the user assembled model we created, which again, it is not a component, but 4 and 5, they were components of this one. Row 6 again was the parent, and then row 7 was the actual simple model that was associated with that. So it did create that component model as well. And then row 8 was just the asset record. So this looks good as well. So these are okay comments to have. They were ignored, but they were ignored for a reason. Okay, and now we go into our asset import staging and see what happened here. We don't have the results yet, so depending on how many, whether it's come in yet or whether it's finished or not. So let me just pause the demo while it finishes running. Okay, so I'm back and it finished running. So I'm just going to go back into the create models and assets. I can see the run that we did here. We called it demo, create models and assets. I'm going to go over here into the asset import staging, which now shows me, come on, oh, it's down. Okay, which now shows me all of the different rows that it did. So it inserted an asset for row 1, for row 2. Child assets are not created or has an error, so leave the asset and build. Okay, so this is because in the spreadsheet, if you remember when you're creating the models manually, to be able to add assets, child assets, you need to put the asset, of a user defined or pre-assembled, you need to leave the asset in a build state. So this is something I did wrong on the template. This should have been build, not in stock, so that it would allow me to add these components or child assets to the parent asset. So what it did is child assets are not created or has an error, so leave the asset in build state. So it actually left, if we go back, when we go and take a look at this, this asset should be in a build state. And then it went ahead and added the child asset for me. So it actually helped me here by fixing my state for me. Consumable records cannot have quantity field empty, and I must have left the consumable field empty, and I did. So I screwed up again. This one. This is where we had consumables. This should have had a quantity of 5 or 1 or whatever the quantity of consumables again. So this was an error in my error in populating the template. So you can see how easy it is to make errors, but at least the error messages that are generated by the bulk import are very, very useful in telling you what you did wrong. That's why when you're doing bulk imports, especially in a customer, and especially when you're doing large quantities of imports, you should always follow best practice, which is to, populate your templates, load them in the test environment, right? Or the dev environment. Make sure they look good. If they look good, fix spreadsheet errors like the ones I had, add the 5, leave it in build state. And then once you've got your template clean, load it in your test environment, see what that data looks like. And then when everything looks good in your test environment, load it in your production environment. Don't go and load assets directly into your production environment, or you're going to have incomplete errors, and you're going to have to then fix and just create a different template to fix all the mistakes that you made. So you want to make sure you're fixing those mistakes in your subprod instances, not in your production instance. Parent structure is complete, moving to desired state. Parent structure is complete, moving to desired state. So I bet you this has moved me to build state as well. And then it created these other ones. So you can see it pretty much created all of my assets except for the consumable, because it couldn't do much with the consumables because I didn't tell it how many quantities. So that's something we would have to fix and re-import. But if we go and take a look, the rest of these should be added. So we're going to go back over to the enterprise asset estate so we can see what actually happened. Now we added medical devices. So we can come into medical. I'm just going to make my life easier here and sort things by date created. Or updated, I guess, should work. Wrong way. And now I should see all of the different assets that we're at. Actually, we should go over and take a look at the models, make sure the models got added properly. Again, we're going to take a look at the updated date. And I did it again, updated date. So here is the Acme user assembled medical device. Here's the pre-assembled medical device. Here is the user assembled component model. Here's the simple model. Here's the consumable model, and all the different models that we created. So if we look at our spreadsheet, we should have had a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 models created. This 8th one was just the extra asset. So if we look, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So all 7 got created. We got our user assembled, pre-assembled, simple, consumable, etc. And they all were in a state and in production. So we can take a look at, say, our user assembled. And we go and see that the components actually created properly. So here's our consumable medical device with a quantity of 5 required. And here's our component, our simple asset with a quantity of 1. We can also take a look now at the assets that were created. So here is the one parent asset that was created. We're going to open that up. And we can see this is the parent asset that we created. All the fields came across. We didn't put too many in there, so so that's good. Oh, one thing I did see, I had something else that I screwed up on the template, is I didn't specify the currency type. So one of the things you need to do in your template when you're putting in your costs is to prefix them with the currency code, because it is possible big organizations, multiple currencies, purchasing in multiple geographies are going to be purchasing in multiple and different currency types. So I should have added my currency code before my currency. And that's why that didn't come across. Again, this is a great example why you do this in dev first. You can fix these things before you start running them in test. I can now see that it's created my child component, or my child assets. And those have been created. And so that is how a very quick demo on how to populate the template for a bulk import, and some of the common errors that you're probably going to see as you go through and populate these templates. So if you can imagine, as you were migrating from another system, if you're a net new customer, or if you're doing large shipments, etc., populating the template is a time-consuming thing. It does require attention to detail. I would definitely advise breaking things down. Sometimes creating the models first, then creating the assets might be easier. Breaking down, doing all your parents first, then doing all your children. Those kind of ways to break down your imports into more logical imports will likely help you reduce the amount of errors. But when you do get errors now with enterprise asset management, it really does give you some really good informational about why a particular row may have failed. And again, the indexing number is really, really helpful in terms of identifying where in your import template you have an error. So now you're going to be able to cross-reference. If it was row 575, you're now going to be able to look at your template at row 575 to find that error, to find the mistake you made, and fix that before you move it into production. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this was useful. Please remember to visit the ServiceNow docs site. One of the great docs site documents that's posted for enterprise asset management is a list of all the mandatory fields for your templates. So mandatory fields when you're creating a model, mandatory fields when you're creating an asset. So that will really help you understand what do I need to make sure I have populated. So that's some great information that's on the doc site. And again, you can join the EAM community in the ServiceNow communities. Thank you very much for your time.